you probably aren't aware of the identity gap, and that it's one of the biggest afflictions that keeps people stuck today. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this. If you don't know who I am, I'm Calen Compass. I'm an author. I'm also an authority on personal transformation and growth. So the identity gap is the difference between who you really are and your ideal self. Why do I say this keeps so many people stuck? A great example, I'll tell you a quick story, is my dad. My dad associates as an athlete. He associates as somebody who's fit. But if you look at him, nobody on the outside would describe him like that at this point. And I'm not hating on my dad. I'm just stating the facts. He's overweight. He doesn't move very much. He doesn't have a very healthy diet. And that's okay. I'm not having judgment towards that. But he has an identity gap where he identifies one way, but reality tells a different story. So why does this keep so many people stuck? Well, in their life, I have a lot of guys that I talk to and they're like, I know I'm going to be successful one day. I know I'm going to have things one day. I know I'm going to have this relationship one day. And I'm like, what makes you think that? What in your life are you doing to bring that into a reality? And the truth is, they're not. They're not doing the things. They're not taking the steps that are going to lead to that eventuality. So they're saying, I know this is going to happen, but it's delusional. Truthfully, that's what it is. It's delusional, guys. And if you're one of these guys, I want to help you with this video. And I'm going to break this down here. So people have this idea of who they are, and they think about where they're at right now, and they tell themselves a story in their head about how their life looks. But if somebody objectively is looking from the outside, they probably wouldn't actually describe it as that. And the identity gap is there for you to look at your ideal self. What would your ideal life look like? Who would that guy be? Who would that girl be? Whoever it is. And then you look at that and then you say, okay, but here's who I really am over here. And that's dictated by the things that you do repeatedly. What sort of habits do you have? What sort of decisions do you repeatedly make? And so the results of your life are ultimately just a reflection of that. Now, if you've started to change, results take time. So it's a lagged reflection. And sometimes it may take a year, sometimes maybe 2 years in order to start getting those changes to roll. But guys, it's so important because if you never identify where you're at, like here's another example. Let's say you're in Boise, Idaho. That's where I'm at right now. And I want to go to Dallas, Texas. Well, I need to know where I'm at in order to go southeast. I need to know. But if I don't know where I'm starting at and I just say, okay, I want to go to Dallas, well, that's better than nothing because you have to have a destination and hopefully you have a timeline for that destination. Otherwise, who knows when you're going to get there? And you say, hey, I want to go somewhere else. It's like, well, where? Anywhere. You want to go up, down, left, right? Does that make sense? So this is the problem with the identity gap, that most people have this amorphous view of who they could be, but they haven't actually put it into terms. They haven't actually gotten concrete. Here's the values that I want. Here's what my ideal day would look like. Try that as an exercise. That will really help you. In your most ideal day, just 5 years from now, what would it look like? How would you wake up? What are the things that you would do? How would you spend your time? What are the things that you would work on? What would you be making money with? What would your relationships look like? Who would that person be in those relationships? If you're a man, would you be dominant? Would you be the leader of your household? If you're a woman, would you be subservient? Would you have this amazing husband? Or are you one of those people who's like, no, I want to be different than that? That's okay. I'm not having judgment one way or the other. But the truth is, if you don't identify that, then how are you ever supposed to hit that target? And that's the identity gap. And so people, they have these ideas and they build them up in their head. And they're really just part of stories. And if you've been following me for any length of time, I talk a lot about this stuff because it's so important. This is the difference between when people get their personal life right, dude, their business explodes because they start getting clarity. And clarity really is a superpower. And you have to have the core fundamentals right if you want to build and stack from there. You can have all the best skills in the world. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you can't implement it, if you can't bring it into your life, bring it into reality, how do you expect to actually start getting results? So most of us want really three big things, and those are experiences, growth, or contribution. And I say that because most of us want to meet our values, and values are really the emotions that you value feeling. They're states, right? Like, you don't really want the vacation, you want the amazing feelings that go along with the vacation. The car is just a means to get the end value. You want to feel what it's like driving in that car or driving in that truck. For me, I moved out to Idaho last year, and I'm in an amazing house. I'm in the mountains. I'm surrounded by these huge firs and trees, and I've got elk in the backyard. And for me, that's valuable. Every single day, I sit out on the front porch or the back deck where I'm at right now. I listen to the sounds. I don't know if you can hear them or not. I've got turkeys running through the backyard, and I watch the wildlife. I've got hummingbirds and bees everywhere. And for me, that's valuable. That's valuable because those are the things that I value. Like, Lambos are great, but this does it for me. This is my jam. And if you want to find your jam, you got to get clear about that. And you have to get clear with where you're at right now and who you need to be in order to bring that into reality. And that's the gap. Who I was 5 years ago they could not accept where I am today. I didn't feel worthy of it. Guys, truthfully, I couldn't be here because I couldn't accept this much goodness in my life, this many blessings, this amount of money flowing to me. I couldn't accept the sheer amount of abundance that I have now because I didn't have the self-worth back then. I didn't have the discipline. I didn't have the daily habits. I didn't have the things that really integrated everything. And so that's a lot what I talk about is integration and gaining congruence so that you're heading directly on a path. And that path is different for everyone. And I want to be clear here because there's so many guys online that are like, you just need to copy my exact strategy. Dude, copy the fundamentals. Copy the principles, because there are certain fundamental principles that work for everyone. You have to have a degree of discipline, but the degree of discipline that you need is up to you. You need a degree of orderliness in your life, but the degree of orderliness is up to you. Some people, they have to have their house spotless. To me, that's a waste of time. Yeah, I like things in order to a degree, but I don't like spending extra time on small things. People that focus on small things live a small life. I like to focus on the big things. I like to live a big life. That's how I like to do it. But this is about the identity gap, and it keeps so many people stuck out there because they built this idea, this illusion of who they are and their identity, and then one day they wake up, their partner's filing for a divorce, something happens, they're fired, and they're like, wow, I just didn't even see that coming. Well, no wonder you didn't see it coming because you're operating outside of reality. It's naivety. And humans want to feel a degree of certainty. It creates safety. But when you have too much certainty and you can't face reality, you can't handle the truth, you can't handle the facts. Well, on the other side of that is that you get blindsided. So you can have growth voluntarily, or it can be forced upon you. Most people wait, reactionary, and they allow life to force growth upon them because they would rather stick their head in the sand. And guys, this has never been a better time for now because so many people are like this. Dude, it's unbelievable. All you have to do is be real, be authentic, and it's painful at times. It's painful to look in the mirror. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to close this identity gap. So one of the things that I had to do is I had to look in the mirror. This is probably 6 years ago at the time, and have a conversation with myself because I would look in the mirror. Well, first of all, I rarely looked in the mirror, but then I would look in the mirror and I saw this guy looking back and I imagined him big and shredded and, in shape. And that's who I saw. And then I finally broke through this wall. I reached threshold and I went and I looked in the mirror and I was pale and I was flabby and I looked sickly. I wasn't proud of who I was. Dude, it was hard. It was a hard look. And then I looked at my days. I said, how am I spending my time? What are my habits like? If somebody outside were looking at me, what would they think of me? And I just put myself in that perspective. And I wrote all of this down, guys. I literally pulled out pen and paper. I wrote these things down and I drew a line on one side of the paper. Here's who I am. And I would encourage you to do this as well. Pull out a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. Here's who I am right now. Here's the attributes that I have. Here's the characteristics. What would my character be like? Would people identify me as somebody who tells the truth or somebody that lies? Would they think of me as somebody that has integrity or somebody that doesn't have integrity? Doesn't have integrity meaning duality. Yeah, I did. I had a lot of that. And so I wrote it all down on the left side, and then I just used inversion thinking, and I flip-flopped it. I was like, okay, well, I'm not getting the results that I want in life when I don't have any discipline. So why don't I add some discipline? And I don't feel like I have integrity, so why don't I start gaining integrity? And I'm not keeping my commitments in the level that I want, so why don't I start keeping my commitments? And as I went down that road further, I figured out, well, I don't really like commitments a whole lot because I like a lot of freedom in my life. That's one of my highest values, if not my highest value. So I just don't make a lot of commitments. That's okay, but the ones that I make, I keep because I'm serious about it, because I realize the depth with which it matters. And then once I did all of this stuff, guys, dude, my business exploded, my life exploded. Now I've been in a relationship for 4+ years, and it's great. And what I want to convey to you is it can be great for you too, but you have to address the identity gap if you want to be that version of yourself who you're envisioning. And you can no longer live in the shadows. You can no longer live in illusion. You can no longer live in a state where you're telling yourself lies. Dude, it's painful. You may cry. You may go through all sorts of heartache over it. But I promise, on the other side of that is growth, and there's a better version of you. And that better version doesn't have to be some rigid, whatever type of person. It can be whoever you make it. But it will be better than who you are today because you've got more in you. And I struggled with this. I talk to guys, I talk to girls that struggle with this all the time, and they just can't seem to break through this wall. And so that's why I wanted to make this video, because they have this idea of their life, but they're not looking at the results that they're getting. They're not looking at their actions. They're not honestly having critical thinking about where they're at. So if you want to change that, if you want to close the identity gap, figure out your ideal self, you got to sit down, grab a piece of paper, write these things out, write out your top values. What emotional states do you like to feel the most? What would your perfect day look like? What are the attributes in life right now that aren't getting results? And what are the attributes that you would like to see? And then how can you put those into practice? And then how can you stack those over time, guys, so that you actually build that version of yourself and you get that ideal version of yourself. So guys, hope this helps. Be great.